Okay, we're going to go over the Glyphs demo again. So when you click on Glyphs, you'll notice that nothing actually pops up in your screen, but if you look over at your top bar, you'll see that it has changed to Glyphs. So what you want to do to start off with is just open a new file, and then you'll see this new default font file with Glyphs that Glyphs has filled in for you. It's just a basic glyph set, A through Z, 0 through 9, and some very basic punctuation plus space characters. Now, let me just enlarge the screen really quick. So if you press Command I, you'll open up the font info window. You can also access it from the File drop-down menu, Command I. So here is where you can name all your fonts information. So you can have family name. I'll probably name this as Glyphs Demo. Keep that as 1,000. There won't be that many instances for you to change that. And you can type in your name and your website and so forth. And every time you update this, you can also make a habit of updating your date. And for now, we can ignore the custom parameters because we're just starting up with Glyphs. Here, you'll notice that there's a master tab, instances, features, other settings, and notes. What you do want to pay attention to is the master's settings. So here we have a regular, and it has these like metrics, stems, and axis coordinates. So what this means is, for instance, like this is a master that takes care of the regular weight, and here you can have different weights such as the thin or the bold, whatever cornerstone you want to make your Glyphs files at. So here I'm just going to stick to regular for the purposes of this demo. And here you can see the metrics, the ascender, cap height, x height, descender, and italic angle. So if we double click and go into Glyph, I'll go into a P for now. You can see this light gray shape with a faint outline of a P there pre-filled for us. So here, if we change the ascender, the ascender, cap height, x height, or descender, and not the italic angle, but everything else, these 4 metrics, then you can see these lines change. For instance, if I put x height as, let's say, 650, just to make a big difference, you do have to open up a new tab or go to another tab and come back to refresh it. You'll notice that the x height line has gone considerably up. And so here is where you can change those parameters. I'll go back to being 500, and then once we refresh, it is right there. Yeah, we'll go back to the instances font window in a little bit. So the features is where all your open type features will live. We'll go into that later. And then for other settings, this is something that you have to pay attention to later on, but when you're just starting out with Glyphs, just don't touch anything in there for now. Okay, and we'll go into the Glyphs interface a little bit. So here you can see a toolbar up on top, and then some other windows on the right side. It's not that much different from what you would encounter in Illustrator, for example. So here we can see the selection tool where you can select things, and here is a pen tool that you're familiar with. We'll go back to that in a second, and a knife tool where you can cut shapes. And then if you click and hold, you'll find that you can toggle between different types. And here's a shape tool that you can use to make geometric shapes. Well, actually, let me go back to that. So there's a rectangle, and then you can also use this as a point of rotating things. Here's the scale tool. And then the T is for typing different characters. So this font editing window also doubles as your kerning and spacing window. So here I'll just type in hello, and then you can see everything else happening at the same time. And this is the P as a reminder. So as you're drawing the P, you can draw all, you can see all these different characters in your window. So let's go back to having just the P on our window. And this is where, yeah, then you can hold and drag things. Here is, I believe, where you can make notes. Yeah, so here is where, oh, that went away. So here is where you can make like text notes, like change this later, for instance. So you can have notes like those. And of course, you can just delete them. And the zoom is pretty self-explanatory. You can drag in order to zoom into a different part of your glyph. If you press Option, it'll also give you the option to zoom out as opposed to zoom in. And then here's a ruler where you can measure things. This comes in very useful when you're trying to make stem measurements even. So here, in order to lock it in a 90-degree angle, I'm using my Shift key. And I believe this is for hinting, and then I believe these two tools are for hinting. That I am actually not too sure. It's the pixel tool. Got it. So if you hover over it, you'll see a little description of each tool and the keyboard shortcuts for each of them. So in the class that we covered plugins. So if you go into Window, Plugin Manager, here's where you can see all the different plugins. There are a lot of plugins. I think the plugins that I recommended for you are in this slide. Let me just go back to. Yeah, here we go. So if you need to go back to the plugins that we saw in the class, these are the recommended plugins: the Reporter Toggler, Blindfold, Label Color, and Red Arrow. And so once you have the Reporter plugin installed, you can see, make this larger, you can see the plugins over here, and you can toggle them on and off. I don't have a label color, but if I did have a label color, I can see the label color coming on and off. And this comes in handy when you're having, when you have multiple letters such as this, and you have some that are more done than others. So let's say, yeah, so here you can see that some are more or less final than others, or whichever hierarchy you want to organize them in. And the dimensions window is where you can put your notes in. So if you have certain measurements for stem widths or curves, you can put them in the dimensions. You can put, okay, so like if it's 50, you can keep it 50, and maybe that's like 55 and so forth. So you can keep measurements in there just to make sure as you're drawing, all your stem widths are the same or are around the same range. And the transformation panel, you've probably seen something very similar in Illustrator panel. There's a Pathfinder-esque good thing over here. We can merge, subtract, and then tools where you can align things as well. Let me actually go into the like a drawing demo before we do this. So let's say for an N, I'm going to delete all the other letters here so it's a little bit more cleaner. So for drawing an N, for instance, perhaps you are starting with a pen tool, and let's say, for instance, you were trying to draw a stem, but it went a little bit wonky. Here is the tool that you can use. You can select 2 points, align them to the left, align them to the left or right, and then you have parallel lines. And here is where you can also align them to the top and align them to the bottom. So here right now we have a perfect rectangle. And something of note is that when you have measurements set for your x height and baseline, you can see that once it snaps to a certain line, it makes these little corner points, well, these little diamonds. Here, I'll do that for the baseline. So there you go. So I'm back in the pen tool and I'm just drawing a shape that is not perfect, but I'm just trying to get things on there. So as I'm drawing, for instance, right here where I want the line to go straight up, I'm clicking and then I have my shift button in order to lock my handlebars. And then again, pressing shift. It doesn't really matter if the off curve points are off looking, we'll fix that later. And then you close back the shape. And if you see here, there's a little eye. If you click on the eye, it gives you a little preview window. And you can control the size. And then you can control the amount it blurs if you want to test how well the forms might hold up in small scale or blurry atmosphere environments, for instance. Okay, so back to the end shape. I do want to make these a corner point as opposed to curved points because these are just straight. So I'm just going to delete them. I'm selecting these off curve points, deleting them. And then because these are curve points, if you remember in class we talked about the difference between a corner point and a curve point. So a corner point looks blue and it has squares on them, and a curve point has circles and it has these off curve handles. Sometimes if there's a corner point connecting to a corner point connecting to a curve point, there will be a handle on the corner point side as well. So here I'm just adjusting these values. I mean, this isn't perfect, but just for the purposes of this demo, I'm just trying to get this to a somewhat inoffensive shape. So to move points, you can use the arrow buttons on your keyboard. If you use just the keyboards, just the keys by themselves, you move 1 unit. If you use a shift, it goes by 10. And the same goes for the off curve points as well. You can move them independently, or you can just use, you can drag this curve on the ends that you can see. So here, if you drag them, you can see that the off curve points are moving. You don't want to use this too much though, because that will create inaccuracies, and you do want to refine them manually once you do get to that point. And remember, you want the handles to be proportional. So if you see here, I'll go back. So Command Z is just going back, and then once you see here, these handle points are not even. So even though it might not look too bad on the preview, so for preview I'm holding down the spacebar, you want these to be proportional. So if you imagine this as a round oval, you want, let's say if this is like a 1-to-2 ratio, you want this to be 1-to-2, so, which is obviously not, this is maybe like 1-to-4 at this point. So I'm dragging this until I get to a satisfactory point. I think that looks a little bit more even. And then here is a little bit off-putting as well, so I'll just move that. Okay. I mean, that's not that great, but we'll move on. Okay, so in order to change a point style, for instance, if you wanted to make a corner point over here for whatever reason, you can press return or you can double click. So if you double click, you'll see that the type of point changed, and now as a curve point, you couldn't, it was always locked. The other handle moved with the other handle, but if once you press return or double click, that is now broken. So now it's a corner point, so it's not locked to a curve. You can do whatever you want. So there we go. And then of course to change the spacing values. Okay, that's not that great of an end, but just ignore that. So here is where you can space. So if you can type, so what I did was press the T key to get back into the typing mode, and then I press a bunch of N's, and then from here, I'm adjusting my space value. So here is the left side bearing value, and here is the right side bearing value. And this is the entire width of the letter, including the design outline left to right, and also the side bearing from the left side to the right side. So here I can give myself whatever values I'd want. That's probably too far. And then let's say like I want it to be 80. Okay, and then like, do I want this to be 65? What values do I want that to be? Um, and also a little bit about this little font info window. So here is the kerning values that you would give to whatever letters on the side. So here, if I did kern it, it would kern it to another N, which is not very useful at this point. But if you had a lowercase, let's say like an uppercase A with an uppercase V, it would be very useful in this scenario. So here from the window, you can also see this value called 006E. That's the Unicode value. So each letter, if I go back to the overview window, so you see the Unicode value on this lower right side corner. So each letter has a Unicode value, and this is what that little preview window is showing you. Oh, right. So I'll do one little thing. So here, I was going over in the class that you do need an instance for you to be able to export a font file. And here, so you do want to create an instance. I would just add instance, have something as a default in there for now. Just make sure that the master weight, it says the regular master weight is 100, the instance is 100. So whatever you're seeing in the design space is what you're getting in this instance. And in later classes, we'll cover what it means to have instances that are not exactly the same as the master values. But for now, just keep it simple. And then I think there's just one more thing that I do want to add in here, that during class we went over calligraphy and how to bring those sketches in. So here you can see, let me go back. Okay, so here is an example of an image that you might have scanned or taken a photo of from your calligraphy exercise. And from here, you probably want to adjust it a little bit in Photoshop so it's clear and it doesn't have any sort of background color, and it's widely spaced enough for you to cut up. So what I did from here is press Command-Shift-4, which allows you to grab a space in your screen. And then what I would do is just collect little screenshots of these letters. And if you see here, they're showing up on my desktop. So what I did from there is collect them into a little folder. And you do want the links to not break, so just don't leave it in your desktop. So just collect them somewhere, preferably in a nice little folder that you're organizing for this class. And here, so I have GRAN, so I'm just gonna temporarily delete this so you can see what I'm doing. So here, I'm just dragging the sketches from the Finder window directly onto my Glyphs app. So here I dragged it onto the G. I'm pressing Shift so the ratio doesn't go off. So if you press Shift, it keeps the ratio correct. And then you're just going to adjust it. I have the R, let me put that in there. And it doesn't have to be perfect, you're just trying to see what it looks like for now. Okay. So that's that. And if you remember during class, I did show you how to change the values. So the sketches aren't the same as vector outlines in the sense that they don't take up any physical space. So you'll see that the value is always going to be 0 on the left-hand side. And then there'll just be a lot of right side bearing values because it doesn't think that there's anything in here. So here for the A, I'm just going to adjust it so maybe it's like 420. And then here's where you can type in your sketches. Ooh, that's the N definitely needs more. Let's say you can also use Shift to go up in your values for spacing. So let's say that's 500. Yeah. So here you can test out what your letters might look like. There we go. That G is probably way too small, for instance, so I'm just going to scale that up. Ooh. Okay, and that looks a little bit better. Okay, there we go. Okay. And so once I have that, then I would go to the drawing, right click, lock image, and then start drawing. And then once you start drawing, see how that end preview went away? That's because once something is drawn in that space, Glyphs thinks that there's no reason to keep that sketch preview in there anymore. So here you can see that it's useful to keep the glyph that you're drawing next to your glyph somewhere, so you can see the outlines getting filled in as you're doing this. All right, so I'm just gonna make something in there just for the purposes of showing you how to export something. Okay, well, that's a terrible end, but it'll serve for now. So if you do Command I, go back in instances, just make sure that it's named a style that you want it to be. So that's regular for me. I'm keeping everything the same. There we go. Okay. And then what we're going to do is go in File, Export, or Command E. So if you do Command E, you do want to have Remove Overlap checked. AutoHint doesn't really matter for now. TTF, so if it's as default, it's saved as an OTF. If you want to save as TTF, you click on that. That doesn't really matter too much as in this stage of the class. What you do want to make sure is that the export destination is set to something that you want it to be. So here, I'm putting it in this, sorry, let me just change the columns. Yeah, so here I'm just going to put it in the test font folder. So here I'm setting that folder in, and then next. And then it should be in there now. So let's see. Yeah, so here we go. We have a test font, .otf. So what you can do from here is you can open it with FontBook. And then once you open it with FontBook, it's just called Glyph Demo for now. And then if you, so this, we are within FontBook right now. We can see that the Glyphs demo file is installed in there. And then once you start exporting different versions of this file, you do want this to go away. So the older versions can get rid of, and the new ones will be in there. So you do want to put Command Delete, and then it'll ask you if you want to remove the selected fonts. Remove, and then you can update your font file. So now if you want to automate this process a little bit, I do recommend checking out this tutorial on the Glyphs app. So if you go in tutorials, you can see how to directly install your font files to the Adobe font folder. Let's see. Yeah, see here it says testing your fonts in Adobe apps. So this is the tutorial that you want to go through. What you're essentially doing is that you're going in the application support for Adobe and changing permission settings so you can directly export font files in there. They don't allow you to do this off, right out of the box because they have security that they don't want these random programs installing into the Adobe applications files. So here, I think the tutorials are self-explanatory, but you can always ask me if you are having any trouble, and then we can just set up an office hours or something where we can go through this together. And then so what happens here, I've just created a shortcut for what I've done. So here, if you see, let's see, show an enclosing folder. Yeah, so what happens at the end of this is that you can just do Command E, export, and then it will go live in your library within the Adobe folder. And then this will be accessible to you regardless of whatever suite you're using. So Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, they will all be accessible for you. And then if you just do Command E, then you can just go back in your applications, and there's just no need to install and reinstall. So that'll save you a little bit of time for those of you that just don't want deinstalling things all the time. Let's see if there's anything I missed. I think that's about it for now. All right, good luck.